Hello, how are you? Hope this will work. I have an old camera and the battery is going dead really fast. So it's right now pretty low. And sometimes then, the recording is not as good. I want to talk about the date setting today. How do people come to this date of 2025? Well, I found some videos, old videos, with this Josh Peck and Ken Johnson on Prophecy Watchers. I've watched Prophecy Watchers many years ago until I realized they are dispensationalist. And out of this group of people come a lot of people, prophecy people, that are unfortunately dispensationalists. Many that I've watched in the past. And then started to realize, wait a minute, dispensationalism, this timeline of dispensationalism is absolutely wrong. And so what they're trying to do is, yes, they have done some research, Ken Johnson and Josh Peck have done some research on the Essene Calendar, and they said, oh, we have synchronized it with our Gregorian calendar today, but their thinking and their timeline is still false, because they go by dispensationalism. And you hear that over and over and over again, that they bring in this false assumption. Also, oh, there's a gap here and there's a gap there. No, there is no gap, people. Okay? It's one timeline. God doesn't hold on, the timeline and says, okay, we're going to need a gap here. It's one timeline. No gap. 2,000 years, and they are right. But see, the Essenes have really, should I say, ages, 3 different ages, really 4 different ages, with, of course, the millennium being the last age. And yet we can say that. Now, if we're calling it dispensation, then we're going wrong. It's not dispensation. It's, yes, they are ages. 3 different ages, and then we have the millennium. Each age is 2,000 years, and that makes together 6,000 years of humankind, which correlates with the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest, where God rests. That's the millennium. So that is correct. That's what the Essenes, and I hope you know who the Essenes are. If not, research. They were these people that lived in the Dead Sea area during Jesus' time. John was affiliated with it, maybe even Jesus. And they wrote a lot of, or collected a lot of prophecies. They read or hid the scrolls in these Dead Seas, called the Dead Sea Scrolls today. We have found them in these caves. Okay, so those are the scenes. They are priests. They were a priest of the real priests. The priest that was in Jerusalem was corrupted during Jesus' time, and they claim to be the true priest, the true priesthood. They practice things still the real way, according to Moses. And they had, of course, prophecies, and they mentioned the Melchizedek prophecy, which I don't think is in our, and did not land in our Bible, but which showed clearly when Messiah would come. So the Essenes knew exactly who Messiah is, when he would come, and so on and so forth. So they should have recognized him. Of course, all these scenes were destroyed. They probably, again, the ones that finally realized who Jesus is, became Christians, and they left Judea They left Jerusalem, left Judea, and went into the diaspora. It means they left Judea because they knew what would happen in Judea and in Jerusalem, because Jesus in Matthew 24 prophesied it. He said, this is what's going to happen, and you better get out of Judea, you better get out of Jerusalem, or else you're going to be killed. So, this a short history of the Essenes. So this Ken Johnson and Josh Peck, they researched the Essene Calendar, which is much closer to God's, or not much closer, it is God's calendar. And the Essene Calendar goes by, again, these ages, 6,000 in all. That's the human history, and it will come to an end after 6,000 years. And this is when the day of the Lord starts, which is the millennium. These 6,000 years, again, are divided into, I don't remember, 500 years each, and then these again into 50 years each, which are the Jubilees. And they say that they discovered, when a Jubilee was. And really, they don't. They only guess, really. They don't say, they say 75 after Christ, AD, ended a Jubilee. So that means 50 years before, 25 after Christ, ended the last Jubilee. And of course, Jubilees always end the ages, 6,000 years, the 2,000 years. But there, in itself, for me, logical thinking explanation does not make sense. My brain is a very logical brain. Has to make sense. So they really, again, they think they can synchronize it with the Gregorian calendar. But in reality, we really don't. Gregorian calendar, I don't know when he started, way after Jesus' birth. And we cannot even place really Jesus' birth at 0. That is impossible. If they do that, that's wrong. I think there's more evidence showing that Jesus was born, 3 before Christ. Before Christ. So that means he may have died 30 AD after Christ. 0 being, they set 0 as the date of birth of Jesus, which was wrong. And we think that today, right? 0 is when he was born. No. Most likely he was born before that time, and he died around 30 AD. Is it AD? Yeah. After Christ. So the whole calendar is really messed up, and maybe there's a purpose why it is messed up. Now we can say 70 AD is when the temple was destroyed. And he mentions the temple. But that is not a landmark in this timeline that we can put anything on. Because see, if Jesus was crucified 30 AD, that was in the middle of the 70 weeks of Daniel, and the 70 weeks of Daniel finished the time of the Hebrews, the time of maybe what they call Torah, because that's what the Essenes did. 3 time periods. I think the first one is confusion or something. The second one is Torah, and then you have the time of grace. 2,000 years each. So if each is really exactly 2,000 years, which I'm not 100% sure either, yes, Peter says in 2 Peter 3, one day with God is like 1,000 years. Like 1,000 years. Doesn't say exactly 1,000 years. It's about 1,000 years. So we have about 2,000 years, very close, exactly, something like it, right? So yeah, the first period from creation to Abraham was 2,000 years. From Abraham to the age of what they call grace is 2,000 years. Now we have to determine, when do these time periods end? And I think we can go to Daniel and figure out Daniel's timeline. Daniel said that the Jews only have that Torah timeline. He gave them 70 years. And he said in the last week of that 70 weeks, in the middle, the anointed one will be cut off. In the middle. So you need to go to Daniel 9. Read Daniel 9. And of course, when we go by dispensationalism, they mess it up. Because they add a gap, they don't read it right, they don't know who the anointed is, they don't know what the covenant is that this anointed one is actually doing, making. So these people, how in the world can they get things right if they don't even have the timeline right? If they go by a false timeline called dispensationalism, which is absolutely wrong, okay? I'm not throwing everything out when it comes to dispensationalism, but the timeline absolutely is wrong, and everything else is. Daniel, the interpretation of Daniel, Matthew, it's all wrong. And that's why, how can these people actually get this Essene information and then even put it in right? They don't. And then they mess it up again. And the whole thing still does not make any sense. So now, do we have to start with Daniel? When is the time of the Jews over? And that is the time of Torah. When is the time of Torah over? When does the time of grace start? Well, we should have that pretty, again, clear. In the middle of the last week of Daniel. That means the last week of Daniel has already been fulfilled for sure, half. So there is no 7-year tribulation left over, and these people keep babbling about the 7-year tribulation time, which is wrong. Daniel says clearly in the middle of the last week of the 69th week, but we have 1 week before the 69th week. That means really the 69th week is the 70th week, and in the middle of the 70th week, the anointed one will be cut off. So he is already fulfilling the middle. And because there is no gap, this peace treaty, no, it's not a peace treaty, of course. It's the covenant that he made with them for a whole week will continue. I have done so many videos. Please watch the video on Daniel 70 weeks. I'll put it on the bottom. That Daniel 70 weeks is so important. Daniel 9 is so important to the time setting. Because we know. Well, we don't know for sure when was Jesus cut off? When was he crucified? In the middle of the last week he was crucified. Do we know for sure? Well, again, I think most likely it was 30 AD. And these people on this video that I watched, they were saying, oh, 33. No, not 33. It could be 33 if really 0 would be the point of Christ's birth, which it isn't. Most likely not. But do we know exactly when Jesus was born? No. I think people can probably figure out, and again, people figured out 30 is the correct timeline when he died. So that's the middle of the week. So 3.5 years from that point is then 33. Because the disciples continued this treaty or this new covenant that he started with who? Israel. They finished it because they preached the gospel to Israel first. That's what the treaty is, the new covenant. The new covenant that Jesus only made with Israel first. A whole week he preached the gospel only to Israel. Again, watch my video. And then after the week was over, this covenant that he only made with Israel, and that was over, then it went to the Gentiles, and that is when the time of grace, what the Essenes use the word grace, did they really use the word grace? I don't know, because I have not done the research. If you have done the research about the Essene Calendar, let me know. If this these time periods, these 3 2,000-year time periods, if they really are named by the Essenes that way, or was that Ken Johnson and Josh Peck that named these time periods that way? I don't see them in front of me right now, but they did. I saw it in one of the videos where they named it that. So I looked it up. Age of chaos, age of Torah, and age of grace, and then of course you have the millennium. That's how they called it. Now I don't know if the Essenes called it that way. Age of chaos was before Abraham. Well, because there was no direction. Yes, there was kind of direction because the patriarchs gave the direction. The patriarchs preached the gospel. They preached Messiah coming. And of course people didn't listen. Maybe that's why chaos. Then we had the age of Torah, 2,000 years, where the Hebrews were used to spread the gospel. And they were supposed to spread that gospel to everybody. But they refused because they were such, selfish and fallen creatures themselves. They constantly committed adultery, idolatry. They had no interest in preaching the gospel to the whole world, which they were supposed to. And of course, their time came to an end because they didn't listen. Their 70 years, God gave them another 70, actually 490 years after the Babylonian captivity. They had another chance and they blew it. And when those 490 years were over, which were over, okay, if we think, if we believe, or if we, assume that Jesus died 30 AD, then the time of Torah was over 33 AD. And the time of grace started. That's when the gospel went to the Gentiles. In other words, the gospel went to everybody, just like God intended it to. Not only the Jews, the gospel now went to the Jews and to the Gentiles. That is the time, what they call the time of grace. There was always a time of grace, people. Salvation always was by grace and by Jesus dying on the cross and that being preached. Except the Jews messed it up. They covered it up. They put themselves on a pedestal. Oh, we're better than everybody else, and nobody else is, saved. And, well, the Gentiles, they only have a animal soul, and, the Jews, they have a soul that can connect to God. Yeah, they created these crazy, should I say philosophies, theologies, whatever, ideas that are not biblical, and they're still preaching them today. So yeah, this timeline is correct. And again, if we go by assuming that Jesus died 30 AD, then it's kind of easy to think, when is this 2,000 years coming to an end? If it's exactly 2,000 years, then it would be over 2033. If it would be exactly 2,000 years. Do we have to still wait that long? We're now 25. So do we still have to wait 8 years to complete this age, what they call age of grace? Jesus called it the time of the Gentiles. So there is, according to Jesus, the time of the Gentiles. Then we can say, oh, there's the time of the Hebrews, and then there is the time of the patriarchs. I think that is a better name. Times of the patriarchs, and you know who the patriarchs are. Adam, the lineage that the Bible shows us all the way to Noah, and then Noah, his son Shem, to Abraham, and then starting with Abraham starts the time of the Hebrews. Then when the time of the Hebrews is over, the time of the Gentiles start. I like that timeline much better, or those names much better. And of course then the millennium. 6,000 years human history. And then it's over. So yeah, do we need a Essene calendar? Well, it would be good to know exactly when Jesus really was, died. And yeah, because of the Essene, like the Jubilee, then we can figure out 50. Okay, that would be exactly then 6,000 years, right? All right. So does that mean we're still going to have to wait 8 years before this is over? So it's not really 25. I don't know who came up with 25 prediction. Again, we don't know exactly, right? Because it was messed up. The Gregorian calendar, I think the Gregorian calendar even set this 0 date later. I think the Gregorian calendar is from 300 or something. No, later than 300, maybe 500, when it was created. It's messed up. Can they really synchronize the Gregorian calendar with the Essene calendar? If they don't know exactly when the Jubilee ended, okay? Can they really say when the Jubilee ended? I don't think they can. The destruction of the temple in 70 AD is not the end of the Jubilee. It's not the end of the time of Torah, the age of Torah, or the time of the Hebrews. The time of the Hebrews was over, again, 33, because that's when the gospel went to the Gentiles, also to the Gentiles, not anymore only exclusively to Israel. I hope that makes sense. So we have to be careful about these, people that set dates. I think they're just babbling around. Tom Horn is the one that really started this stuff too. He was one of the leaders in this, from these prophecy watchers. And again, he was dispensationalist. And I see now lots of them, you know what? Jewish Feast 2025. Now we have people coming out of woodwork saying, this year, the rapture is going to happen. We don't know it. We do not have the correct date. Nobody has yet set a correct date. Should I believe these people that are dispensationalists and are already have most of the prophecy wrong anyways? Then they always add, there has to be a 7-year tribulation time and blah, blah, blah. There is no 7-year tribulation time. In other words, 7 years, 1 week that needs to be fulfilled from Daniel. Doesn't exist. There is no gap. God doesn't hold on to the time because he still has to do something. No, the time will continue. One after another. There's not going to be a time when there's no time. So Daniel is very clear. If you study Daniel, it's very clear that Daniel is fulfilled. The time of the Hebrews is over. The Hebrews don't have an extra time left. They have time right now. They are also now in the time of grace, or in the times of the Gentiles where they can accept the gospel. Nobody keeps them from the gospel. Nobody keeps them from the gospel. They don't have to go back to the old covenant that is broken. They themselves broke the old covenant, which was a marriage contract. And they broke the marriage contract, and once you break you commit adultery, you can't go back anymore. Cannot expect to be getting married again with your husband, your ex-husband that you committed adultery with. And that's what Israel did. That's what the Hebrews did. The old covenant is broken. It's broken. It cannot be fixed anymore. Humpty Dumpty cannot be fixed anymore. It fell from the wall, and that was the end of it. And so people, you need to look at this. If you're not using the correct prophecy, the correct interpretation, you can forget it. It's just, no. Well, I had to take my jacket off. It's getting hot. And was interrupted. So where was I? Yeah, this whole thing does not make any sense. And so I am careful about time setting. Yeah, if it's really, if you really have proof, okay. If you really, really have proof, and maybe God made it that way. Part of God's plan that we don't know it. Again, you can also look at certain things. You see certain signs and you can say, okay, the time is near. We are at the end. There's no doubt in my mind. We're absolutely at the end. At the end of the time, they call it grace. No, I call it the time of the Gentiles, because that's what Jesus used in Luke 21:25, maybe 24. That's what it's called, the time of the Gentiles. Because grace has been here since the beginning. We are all in the time of grace. The Jews, the Hebrews, were not saved through their fake, sacraments. I mean, what is this? Yeah, sacraments, or, offering these lambs and these animals, sacrifices. They're not saved because of the sacrifices and offerings. They were saved through Jesus, period. Age of chaos. Even during the age of chaos, we were saved through grace. That's the way it is. Well, I'm coming to an end, people. Be careful with time setting unless somebody really has proof. There's no saying that, 25 is it, or even 75 is it. No. I'm more likely to believe that it is around 33 when the time of the Gentiles is over. Again, we need to check when was Jesus really born according to the Gregorian calendar, and then we can figure it out a little closer. But then we need to remember that he was crucified in the middle of the last week of Daniel, so then we have to add 3.5 years to the timeline. So after his crucifixion, 3.5 more years. And that completes then the time of the Hebrews. Anyways, and again, people, this is bad stuff about dispensationalism and people being stuck, and a lot of people that are saying they know about end times prophecy when they really don't know about it. Because they're stuck in dispensationalism and they teach false doctrine. False doctrine. Please, if you're new to my channel, check out dispensationalism, playlist dispensationalism, to become familiar with this false doctrine, and not be misled when these people are coming and saying dispensationalism is bad and therefore we're going to throw out the rapture. Okay? Don't do that. You check everything according to the Bible. Not throw anything out. No, check it in the Bible. Does it make sense? In the Bible. Can I find in the Bible? Anyways, let the Holy Spirit guide you.